Hey there, and welcome to the Deep Dive.
Hello.
Today, we're looking closely at a pretty significant legal development, a major Supreme Court decision that just came down.
Right.
We're actually using a news excerpt that you, the listener, shared with us. That's going to be our guide today.
Yeah, and our job really is just to unpack the core facts from that source. What did it report?
Exactly. What actually happened, and what's the immediate impact, strictly based on this piece?
So the mission is clear.
Hmm.
Distill the info from the source. No more, no less.
Okay, let's dive in then. The main event, according to our source, is this Supreme Court ruling. It happened on Friday. And it was about a specific Biden administration immigration program.
And the source says the key thing the court did. It allowed this program to end.
Allowed it to end. Okay.
Right.
Did the source mention how the court allowed it to end, like the mechanism?
It did, and this is an interesting detail from the source. It highlights that the court granted something called an emergency application.
Emergency application.
Yeah. The source sort of explains this as, often used for urgent action outside the court's usual timeline.
So like a fast track.
Kind of. And in this case, the source is specific. It says this application was filed by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem.
Okay, so an emergency application filed by Secretary Noem granted in the court.
And the result, per the source, is the termination of this Biden program.
Termination. So sticking just to what we have in front of us, who was in this program, who's affected now?
The source gives us pretty precise numbers and origins.
Okay.
It says the program had granted temporary legal status.
Temporary status.
Right, letting people live and work in the U.S.
Yeah.
And it affected 532,000 people.
Wow, 532,000. That's a lot of people. Does the source say where they were from?
It does very clearly. It lists Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela.
Got it. Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela, 532,000 people. So when the court allowed the program to end through this emergency application, what exactly do those people lose, according to the source?
Well, the direct consequence reported is losing that temporary legal status.
Right.
And crucially, the permission that came with it. The permission to live here and to work here legally.
That seems like a very significant change for, well, over 500,000 individuals.
Definitely.
And the source links it directly back to this specific ruling and the emergency application mechanism.
Yeah, if you boil it down, the source presents this chain. Emergency application granted, program providing temporary status ends. That's the core sequence reported.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap the essential takeaway from the source then. Supreme Court grants an emergency application.
Filed by Secretary Noem.
Right, filed by Noem. And that action leads to the end of this Biden administration program.
And the impact, again, based purely on the source.
Is on 532,000 people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela.
And what they lose is that temporary legal status and the right to live and work legally in the U.S. that went with it.
Okay, so that brings us to maybe a final thought, drawing only on the details we've just discussed from the source material.
Right, something to consider.
The source uses specific language. It calls the status temporary.
Temporary legal status.
And it notes this whole change happened because an emergency application was granted.
Yeah, those two phrases stand out in the source text. Temporary and emergency.
So, given that specific context from the source, a temporary status ended via an emergency legal move, what does that combination make you think about? Maybe about the nature of temporary government programs themselves, or perhaps about how significant policy shifts can sometimes happen quite suddenly.
Yeah, it's definitely something to reflect on based just on these reported facts,
Yeah.
how things labeled temporary can end, and the mechanisms like emergency applications that can bring about those endings.
Food for thought, based entirely on the information provided in the source we examined today.